times now. This is the first time you're seeing exclusive visuals of that meeting, the meeting which the world had been waiting for with bated breath. That's Prime Minister Narendra Modi shaking hands with Volodymyr Zelensky. This is the first time ever since the Russia-Ukraine war broke out that Prime Minister Modi is meeting Volodymyr Zelensky. This meeting is exceptionally crucial and extremely important because many are saying that India is best fitted to play a sort of peacemaker between Russia and Ukraine. We have good relations with Russia and of course with the West as well. Many say that itself puts India in an advantageous position. Prime Minister Narendra Modi meeting Volodymyr Zelensky. This, remember, meeting is coming in the backdrop of Prime Minister Narendra Modi's big message. PM Modi, of course, as you'd remember, viewers had said earlier that this is not an era for war. This was a big message to President Putin as well, to Russia and to the world that the era of war is over. A message of peace by the Indian Prime Minister. And now, of course, we have that extremely crucial and important meeting of Prime Minister Narendra Modi meeting Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky on the sidelines of the G7 summit. My colleague Rishabh is joining us live on the broadcast with more details on the same. Rishabh, help us understand the significance of this meeting. The world, of course, had been waiting for this meeting with bated breath, and we have now first and exclusive visuals of Prime Minister Narendra Modi meeting the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky in the sidelines of the G7 summit. Rishabh.
Definitely. If you see the excitement around this bilateral meeting between Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, it is very evident on social media itself. Since yesterday, when the news came in that India would be holding bilaterals with Ukraine, it was everywhere on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and even on WhatsApp, where people were talking that what will India's strategy be, given that the G7 is already putting sanctions on Russia and India meeting Ukraine. Having said that, India has been an all-season friend of Russia and vice versa from Russia as well. But now this meeting is very, very significant. This is the first time in the last 15 months since the Ukraine conflict began that India is holding a bilateral with Ukraine, and a bilateral of this magnitude where the heads of government from both the countries are meeting. And if you go by the picture, it's not only Prime Minister but also NSA Ajit Doval is present in the bilateral meeting along with other officials from both the sides. So this shows that it's in high level diplomatic as well as a bilateral meeting happening. And what we know that Ukraine has been in talks with India to convince Russia to stop the offensives on the Ukrainian soil. And it was Prime Minister Narendra Modi, remember, back in September 2022 when in Samarkand on the sidelines of SCO, when Modi and Putin met, it was Prime Minister Narendra Modi who said this is not an era of war, and that became the baseline of any negotiation since then. And this meeting will definitely be a turning point because this is the first time Zelensky and Modi are meeting face to face during the conflict, and it would be very interesting to see the outcome of it. What we are being told that India will be discussing the current situation with Ukraine, and Ukraine would also be extending their gratitude toward the help that India has done for humanitarian aid during the war in Ukraine. Apart from that, remember, India also evacuated over 2,000 students from Ukraine back in 2022 when the war began, and Ukraine had helped India back then. So thank you from the back then is also pending from India. So that will also take place in this bilateral. So a very crucial bilateral happening right now in Hiroshima on the sidelines of G7, where Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi is meeting Ukrainian President Zelensky, and the discussions would definitely be around the conflict, but also how India can bring peace between Russia and Ukraine. Volodymyr Zelensky will try and convince India to speak to Russia and stop their offensive on the Ukrainian soil.
Well, absolutely. Rishabh, stay with us. We also have Mr. Shashank Sareen, who's on the phone line with us. Thank you for joining us on Times Now, sir. What do you have to say about Prime Minister Narendra Modi's meeting with Volodymyr Zelensky? Of course, the world is watching this meeting with bated breaths. Many say that India is best pitted to play the peacemaker. But end of the day, it's a tightrope walk, a diplomatic tightrope walk for India as well, isn't it, sir? Because we share extremely close relations, deep and historical ties with Russia as well.
That's true, and the fact is that this is a meeting I won't look, too deep into this particular meeting. Maybe this is one way of trying to pressure us into, distancing ourselves from Russia. But look, when we talk about India playing the peacemaker, you cannot play a peacemaker until both sides are ready to talk peace. And there is some kind of a middle ground that both are ready to approach. I don't see that middle ground anywhere right now. Not just because the Ukrainians are not going to be satisfied with loss of territory, or the Russians ready to give up the territory which they control and stop the fighting, but also because some of the countries backing Ukraine probably don't want Ukraine to stand down. So I think, trying to jump into this conflict, even if it is as a mediator, is a mug's game, something that India needs to avoid. Yes, you are right. It's a bit of a tightrope walk, but I think that is what diplomacy is all about. That in these kind of difficult situations, you have to walk the tightrope. But we cannot, go in favor of one or the other. We have our own interests to guard, which is what we will do, just as the others did it. I think it is important for India never to forget that countries like Ukraine, for example, were in the forefront of grabbing the opportunity for arming Pakistan, even though they knew that Pakistan is a terror-sponsoring country and opposed to India. At that point of time, they were selling weapons to India. They were also selling weapons to Pakistan. And they had no compunctions in doing that. For them to now, scream blue murder and try and shame the rest of the world. And let us also not forget the Hindu-phobic imagery by the Ministry of Defense and their social media handles against India. The slurs on Hindu idols, on Hindu deities. I think it is important for us to not forget where the Ukrainians are coming from.
No, but sir, as far as India is concerned, I mean, I think the government has made it practically, absolutely crystal clear that Indian interests will always be kept first, whether it comes to West questioning our trade deals with Russia or not. But when it comes to, enjoying decent relations with all the key players here, be it Russia, be it Ukraine, the West, and even the United States of America, it is one country and it's India, which has decent relation with all the players who are involved directly or indirectly in the conflict, sir, isn't it?
No, look, here is the thing. You can keep saying whatever you want to say. The question is, are you willing to go the length to actually prove that, this is where you stand? So, yeah, we can keep saying that we are ready to protect our own interests. The other side will keep pushing us. But we have to show that, and we have to demonstrate on the ground that we will only do what serves our own interests. And to the extent that it matches or converges with interests of other players, yes, we are willing to strike partnerships. That's the name of the game. That's what the others have done. And in fact, that's what the Western world, which has dominated the global system for the last 500 years, has taught us. Now suddenly, when their interests are at stake, they want us to forsake our interests so that, we stand with them. When did they do it when it affected us? Let's look at the British. Did the British ever stand with us during our wars that the Pakistanis foisted on us?
All right.
When did the Brits ever stand with us? Did the British stand with us at the United Nations just a couple of years back? When the Pakistani influence, the Chinese sponsored a resolution against us in the UN Security Council. What was the role that Britain played at that point of time?
All right, I take your point, sir. You said this is a great photo op, but one shouldn't reach too much into this meeting which is being held between Prime Minister Modi and Volodymyr Zelensky. Stay with us, Sushant Sareen. We are also being joined by Madhav Nalapat, strategic affairs expert. Afternoon, sir. Thank you for joining us on Times Now. What do you have to say, sir, about this extremely crucial meeting which is being held between PM Modi and Volodymyr Zelensky? Many say India's best pitted to play a peacemaker, considering that it enjoys good relations with Russia, Ukraine, West and the US as well.
Look, India enjoyed good relations with Russia and Ukraine, and that was clear from the very beginning when what happened was that the Prime Minister Modi was able to get away all the Indian students as well as Pakistani, Afghan and Arab students from Ukraine as a result of the good relations he had with both Zelensky and Putin. So from that point of view, good relations have been there. India has maintained contacts with Ukraine, and therefore this is a welcome meeting because it shows to the whole world that India is not the biased entity that some enemies of India are claiming it to be. India has a very principled position, and that has been articulated by Prime Minister Modi to Mr. Putin himself, which is that the war should end immediately. Unfortunately, many of the countries in the EU, including as of now Mr. Zelensky, are unwilling to end this war, and they want to go on, and that is proposing a great security risk to the economies and to other factors in the world.
Absolutely. It has cascading effects when it comes to a global economy. Thank you, sir, for joining us with your views on this big story. Prime Minister Narendra Modi meeting Volodymyr Zelensky. It's going to be a tightrope diplomatic walk for India as well, considering we share extremely close relations with Russia as well. For now, thank you for joining us with your views on this big story. With that, we'll slip into a short commercial break. News and updates on the other side. Don't go anywhere.